Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Inspired in Berlin podcast. My guest today is Florentina Arsinte. Florentina is a people oriented leader with a wide background in mobile application development and leading cross functional teams. Aside from work, she's interested in boxing, hiking, and spending time with her Shiba Inu puppy, Mochi. I'm sure we will get to know Mochi at some point if he wakes up during the call. Florentina, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Wonderful. It's my pleasure to have you here because it's been a long time since we spoke, at least 4 years. We were together at Here Technologies, coming all the way from Nokia times, and since then you have gone on to lead teams at Here, at N26, at Source Labs. Um, do you want to tell us a bit about how your life has been and how you have changed and grown in this time?
Yeah, sure. At Here Technologies, that's when I started leading teams. I started first as a tech lead, and I found that super interesting, right? And when this engineering manager opportunity came along, I was like, why not? Let's give it a try. I wasn't really sure what engineering managers do, but I said,
Hmm.
you know, I think it's the right move for me. And I'm glad I did that at Here Technologies because it was an environment where I was always comfortable with, right? I knew the people, so it was an easy transition, and that really helped me also in my career after that because I moved to N26 after Here Technologies, spent some time there growing the teams. When I joined, the company was in hyper growth, so we were hiring a lot of people,
Right.
and my organization grew a lot. And again, that part also helped me move to Sauce Labs and eventually move into this director role, and have an overview for a larger organization. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of in a nutshell what happened in the past few years.
Sweet. What were your first thoughts and actions every time you made this kind of slight role change, going from engineer to tech lead to engineering manager, and now I think your title is director of engineering. So every time there's some kind of jump up, what are the first things you do when that happens?
Well, the first thing is panic. No, not really panic, but it's this excitement combined with a little bit of um, being a bit afraid of the new responsibilities, right? So I think this is this kind of good mix of okay, this is
Uh-huh.
exciting, but also it's different. And the first thing I do is really try to understand as much as possible about the responsibilities of the role and what I need to learn or what kind of skills I need to build that I don't have yet, so that I can be successful in the new role. And it looked, thinking back um, at the different transitions, it looks slightly different, of course, because from engineer to tech lead, I think it was a little bit more straightforward because I did
Right.
have people management responsibilities, but again, I was working with the people in the same team. They already knew me. It was easier. But then switching to engineering management, that's when I needed to learn a lot more skills, a lot more soft skills, and improve my communication skills. So there was a lot more, let's say, a longer period to actually uh, get those skills that I needed.
Right. I asked this question because if I remember about every transition that I've made in my career recently, because I went from QA to product management and then more or less similar trajectory as yours, I find myself Googling. That is one of the first things I do, and I check, okay, what does a product owner do? What does a product manager do? What am I supposed to do as this lead? And often it's kind of reassuring, but also you realize that there's 100 different ways that people describe the same role, and then you get into practice. So when you get into practice, do you do you just start trying things in terms of what you read, or do you also try to involve the people around you and see how they see your role? How much of that is kind of driven by you, and how much do you let the environment drive it?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think my approach to that changed over the years. At the beginning, I was trying out more things that I've learned because I really like reading. So I was reading everything. So when I switched to engineering management, just read everything that I could, not literally everything. But over time, I started leaning on the people more and learning from them what they expect from the role. So not only my manager or the leaders in the company, but also my peers, my teams. So really, because I think a lot of the responsibilities for these leadership roles are very specific to the organization that you're part of. So I think it's important to get a lot of information from the environment.
Hmm. And do you find that people have a clear idea of what they expect or need from you?
No, not so much. It it depends. I mean, people have certain expectations, of course, based on their previous experience with the engineering leaders. And as I mentioned, it's different from one organization to the other. I think it's a lot about listening to the different expectations, different opinions, and kind of putting that together and maybe
Mhm.
adjusting your style depending on who you're interacting with. It's the way I sometimes explain to people what these kind of roles are. I use the term fuzzy or fluid because they are very
Mhm.
fluid. They're a lot quite fuzzy, and you have to adapt a lot.
Right. So I'm wondering, let's get into what's what's at the heart of Inspired in Berlin. Um, what I want to ask you is what drives you? What is the part of your work that makes you come alive?
It's helping people actually. So initially when I started on this journey, I wasn't really sure. It took me some time to figure this out, and I have an interesting, well, for me, it's, it's an interesting story about the moment when I figured that out. I had somebody in my team many years ago at the beginning of the leadership career, and they came to me. They weren't really happy in their role, so I tried to help them out, ask questions, do a bit of coaching, give them some ideas. And it turns out that they were interested in becoming an agile coach. So I tried to put them in contact with some agile coaches and try to find some opportunities for them. And after a while, I one of their colleagues came to me and she was like, Florentina, I don't know what you did, but oh my God, he's so much happier at work and he's so much more motivated. And this guy also came to me and you could see that he's actually happier at work. And that's when I realized that this is it. That's exactly it.
Wow, that's amazing. How how did you convince yourself that it made sense? Because it also means potentially loss of a team member, right?
Yes, it does. And in some cases, it actually does happen that the team member decides to go somewhere else because they would be happier there. And, in my book, that's actually a good outcome because it's better to have a team member moving on to a different team or a different company where they're more motivated, happier, instead of staying with my team, for example, and not being able to enjoy their work, right? So I see my role as trying to help them as much as possible within my organization. If that's not an option, I'm happy to help them move somewhere else. And then, of course, it's for the organization. It's not so nice because then you have to find somebody else. But in the end, and in the long term, I think it's best for both parts.
Why do you think it's important now? I think I'm asking leading questions here because I've completely agree with you, and I think most of the audience would as well. But everybody has their own background and their own perspective on why this is important. So what you're saying is it is much more important that the individual is happier doing what they are doing, even if it means a loss of a team member for you or the organization. Why is that so important?
Well, if you think about it like this, we spend most of our life at work, right? You have 8 hours per day, or sometimes more, depending on the person. And if you don't enjoy that time, then you're not going to be as productive as you could be. you're going to be frustrated, right? So it's maybe for a short period of time, it's okay. It could be okay, but in a longer time, it's just it could affect you quite a lot as a human being, as a person, right? Um, and then from the, let's say, putting my business hat on, also from a business perspective, it's not good in the long term to have somebody that's not happy at work and they're not productive. So I think from both sides, it's just if you don't enjoy what you're doing, or you're not really um, kind of coming to work and thinking, hey, I have this cool thing to do today, and I'm happy about it. It's not you're not giving like uh, everything that you could. And yeah, in the long term, it
Yeah.
really can affect people a lot.
Mm. I completely agree. I think when I think about this, what comes to my mind is for too long we had businesses that really looked at people as numbers, as statistics. And now we are starting to realize that there's a lot more to people, especially in creative industries. And software engineering to me is a creative industry. No two software systems are like, even if you're replicating the same thing, if it is the same team replicating the same thing, it is still a different experience because there are still so many variables that change. And disengaged people are at the end of the day hurting themselves and also hurting the company. But like that is still the old paradigm. I much prefer to just focus on the fact that if you just have happier employees, it just makes it so much better for everybody involved. Um, and I think people also learn and grow a lot more because when you are engaged, you naturally try to do things more for yourself as well. Would that be a good enough summary? Would you sign off on that?
Definitely, definitely.
Awesome. So I want to ask, let's suppose you have a team member, and it's not that they want to change to a different role, that they still like what they do. Are there any things you do to kind of keep the spark alive? Um, I'm thinking you mentioned coaching, right? So is that something that you actively do with your with people who report to you?
I do. That's something that I'm also continuously working on improving. So my coaching skills.
Hmm.
That's something that I do with everyone, and I think that's something I actually realized early in my career, because as human beings, we tend to spend more time helping the people that, let's say, need more help from us, and the ones that are happy with what they're doing, we kind of tend to say, yeah, they're fine, they're okay. But this is not how
Right.
it should be. So I think, if you have somebody in the team, of course, that needs some more help, I I definitely do that. I spend it, I invest the time, but also for the people that are happy on their path and are motivated at work, I try to find out more about, what the next steps are. What else are they
Hmm.
interested in doing? Maybe they want to work on a different project, or maybe they want to learn something. I try to encourage them to think about that. So what's the next step? How can I help them get there? And it
Mm.
doesn't have to be like, yeah, I want to become a senior engineer now. Some people have that in mind, some don't, but it can be something as simple as, hey, I want to learn TypeScript. I would really enjoy that. Okay, then let's do it. Let's find a way for you to do that, maybe a course or whatever works for you, and let's make it happen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you think learning, because that's what I take out of this, right? So something that helps the person grow. Um, that is one element where you are definitely focusing a lot. Are there any other elements, company culture, team bonding, those kind of things that you look at?
Yes, yes. It's. I think it depends a lot on the person, or the team, right? And of course, as much as possible. Well, now with in the past 2 years, it wasn't so easy to do any kind of team bonding activities. We did try to do some virtual. Of course, it's not the same. But in my it's in my book, gelled teams are the best you could let's say expect out of a team. Once you have a gel team, they work very well together. They help one another grow. I- it's you can't really compare that to anything else. And it is part of that, like you said, it's getting the team to gel, to work better together, or maybe to openly share feedback with one another. And that's also something that I tried with many teams, to encourage them to give feedback to one another so that they can help each other, so that they don't have to come through me as their
Right.
manager. Mm, yeah, and when it comes to culture, that's something that I I try to empower people, especially the engineering in the team, to take certain decisions, and also to kind of, let's say, influence the engineering culture on their own, because I don't want to necessarily be the one that says, hey, we need to do it this way, but
Mm-hmm.
I can ask the right questions and nudge here, poke there, um, and then see what happens.
Right. So, t tell me about one of your experiences in terms of like what's been your best experience as an engineering lead or as an engineer in a team where all the things that you're mentioning kind of came together or enough of them came together?
Hmm. Well, I think the example that comes to mind is a team that I was working in shortly after I moved to Berlin. I was working in a team at Nokia. It was Nokia back then, and we had all of these things. So we were a super gel team. We got along very well. We helped one another. There was this kind of trust in the team that you knew that people had your back. You could talk to people. You could give the feedback, and there was a lot of opportunity for growth and for learning. And yeah, the culture was really nice. Of course, it was how many years ago? Maybe 10 years ago? Yeah, I think 10 years ago. We were still learning. We just had introduced code reviews, right? So it was a bit bumpy at the beginning. But what made it so special is that everybody wanted to help. So everybody was interested in improving our culture, improving our practices.
Right.
Everybody had ideas. We listened to one another. So we worked very well in that team.
Sweet. So, if I put it all together, so far what I've learned is people who are learning seem to be happier, even if it involves completely changing your roles. Um, and the other thing you just mentioned is kind of people being helpful. Um, is do you see it as a prominent thing that comes up? Because I do see it as a silent actor in a whole lot of situations. I coached a couple of small teams last year, and I'm coaching another company right now. And from time to time, I notice um, kind of helpfulness missing or available. And when it's available, it's an amazingly positive experience. When it's missing, people feel isolated. Um, how do you see it, people kind of promoting it or encouraging helpfulness? Because it doesn't show up on job descriptions, does it?
It does not. Maybe it should. Maybe it should show up in job descriptions. It's the way I share this with people, or I encourage people to help one another, is by saying that we are all in the same boat, right? In the end, sure, we are in different teams maybe, or work on different parts of the product, but we have the same goal: to succeed, to grow, to learn, to have a good experience at work. And if we don't help one another, we're not going to be able to achieve our goals. It's in my head, it's as simple as that. Because it the let's say the reality is not as simple or as straightforward, because there's different priorities, there's a lot of different factors, stress, and there's a lot of factors that come into play. And of course, then you're so focused on what you're doing that you don't look outside and see if you can help others. But
Right.
this is where I think the engineering leaders, or not only engineering leaders, but the leaders, this is where they come in to try to encourage people to, let's say, go out of their box a bit more and help one another and try to nurture this kind of culture.
Hmm. I'm really fascinated by what are some of the things we can do to do exactly that, to nurture this culture. Obviously, one big part is saying all the right things. Um, but aside from that, what else can we do to kind of create the environment? You know, one of those things, tell me you're an engineering leader without telling me you're an engineering leader kind of a thing. How can you make it happen without literally spelling it out?
One way to make it happen is also to lead by example. So you are the one that starts helping others, and you share that, not in a obnoxious way, but of course, you make that visible. And you also, I think what's really important is not only sharing the fact that you're helping somebody else from the company, but also what the results were from that action, right? Because I think also people sometimes it's difficult to see what let's say the outcome would be, right? And it's important for people to also see that. And I think also if you manage to create this kind of safe environment in an organization or in a team, helping others comes a bit more naturally
Right.
for people. That's something that can, of course, it takes some time. It takes some time to set up this kind of environment.
Yeah. What would be the characteristics of a safe, um, I'm assuming psychological safety is what you're mentioning. From an engineering point of view, how do you create a psychologically safe environment?
I I think each leader would have their own slightly different approach, but what I do is really, um, you know, kind of I've heard this phrase many times. I don't usually use it, but bringing my true self to work, right? So I show people that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. This is how you learn. I admit when I make a
Right.
mistake. I share with people what I learned from it. I encourage people to give feedback. I give feedback, and then when people do give feedback to me, I take that feedback and also I share with them what I'm going to do with it. So I'm trying to be very transparent about my intentions, my actions, and just again a bit like leading by example, just and in the end, sometimes it's also about asking the hard questions, even if it's uncomfortable. There are uncomfortable situations, but I think this is also what creates this kind of psychologically safe environment because you ask the question, it might be tough, the person on the other side answers, and it's really all about how you react to that. So it's
Yeah.
really a lot about how you react to the situations that are going on. If you're calm and you listen to people, you um, give advice if needed, or just you could try to figure out what they need. All of these things put together help create a psychologically safe environment, at least from my experience.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I was trying to think examples from my own life, but I think they are a bit irrelevant. One thing came to my mind. I noticed in one of the teams that I was involved with in the recent past, I noticed one of the engineering managers' code reviews. And something that hit me really hard was seeing one of the code reviews where it said, it was pointing to a line in the code and said, "Why do you need this?" Question mark. And I don't know how the engineer who wrote the code felt, but for me, it felt like a really kind of a difficult kind of it hit me hard. It was kind of like it was as if the person on the other side, the engineering manager in this question, was not being helpful. It was kind of putting me on the spot. Um, and when you were mentioning psychological safety, like that moment just became so obvious to me that if I was that engineer, I would feel so unsafe because I've been put in a position where I have to justify myself. Um, so it felt like it was not a co-creation or somebody trying to help me, but putting me on the spot. And I still don't have an answer on how that could have been different. Um, how would you write that question in a way that would be safer than it felt to me in that moment?
That's a good question. Hmm, I'm just trying to think. I haven't done code reviews in quite some time, to be honest. So as you move further away from the code, of course, the less code reviews you do. Right. I think in this case, mm, I think it depends on why the engineering manager asked that question. Is it really that they did not understand what the purpose was? And in this case, you could give some context, like, hey, look, I'm not, like, I don't understand. I'm not really sure I understand. Can you give me some more details about, or some more information about why you did? Yeah, just
Yeah,
being honest that, hey, I don't understand. Maybe I missed something, right? Maybe I'm not familiar with the code and I missed something. So I would try to ask that. If they thought that it's not a good approach to add that
yeah,
there, then you could give some options. Like, hey, I understand why you added this here, um, but it could be better in this place because of this, like giving argument, like giving some options, um, because maybe the person who did write the code missed something on their side. So I think in
right.
this case, either the manager missed something, they,
Hmm.
right, or the other person missed something. The way I would approach is I would add options, arguments to explain to the person on the other side of the code review why I'm asking the question or what's unclear to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah, that would make total sense, and I see that quite often. Actually, what I understood from that, and also what you just said, was kind of bringing context in communication is priceless, because without context, you might be asking the right question, but it can very much feel like trouble to the other person, and then they respond from that place. And with the last couple of years with COVID, everybody working from home, kind of seeing a sentence written down has a completely different feeling to it than somebody asking that question in front of you or asking with a context. Um, and it's almost kind of added the stakes are much higher with communication as a leader than they used to be.
yes, yeah, definitely. So that's something that I also realized that when this whole pandemic started, that you do need to add much more context in all the communication because you are missing exactly this all the social cues that you usually get by being next to somebody in real life. Even over
Yeah,
video, you miss some of the cues, some of the body language, because you maybe see just the head and that's
yeah,
it. You don't see that the person's crossing their arms or has maybe a defensive stance. You don't see
yeah,
that, so you need to add some more context by using your words.
indeed, indeed.
Yeah,
What is some of the bad advice you hear in your profession or in your role?
bad advice. Hmm. I think that the one that comes to mind, which I did not initially when I heard this advice, I did not perceive it as bad, but over time, I at least it became bad advice to me. Mm, it's something along the lines of say fake it until you make it.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so it's something that I read early in my career as a leader. It was targeted at women in tech and in leadership positions, and that book was really a lot about trying to become somebody or not just to be able to do the leadership roles, right? So they were giving
Right.
some advice. I don't remember what the book was, but they were giving some advice to women that want to uh, move into a leadership role to really try to, let's say, pretend to be somebody, and not pretend to be somebody else, but try to
Hmm.
incorporate certain behaviors or certain communication style in their day-to-day work so that they can
Right.
fit into what's expected of the role. And I tried that at the beginning. I did try that, and I realized that that's not me. That's not how I communicate. It's not my style.
Yeah.
And there has to be another way to be able to do the role without still being yourself and not trying to become somebody else. Unless you want to. If you really want to do that, then sure, it's okay. But
Yeah.
this is at least it's I know it's a very subjective kind of thing, but for me this is something that I started considering after a while as bad advice because then you're not really bringing yourself, your true self to work, trying to be somebody
Yeah.
else.
So, what were some of the things that it suggested that you do that felt fake to you?
Well, to me, for example, so I don't like speaking louder than other people or raising my voice to get myself heard. It's just not how I
Right.
communicate. I wait for
Mm-hmm.
people to finish talking. Maybe if we're in a video, I try to make a sign or something, raise my hand. And
Yeah.
this was one of the advice that they gave to speak louder than the others, which I tried and I felt so
Mm.
uncomfortable every time I did that. So I thought
Yeah.
it doesn't work for me. Maybe for other people it works, but for me it did not. So I tried to find other ways
Yeah.
to make it work. I know it's not like a big example, but it's the first one that came to mind. I'm trying to remember what else was there. I think it was a lot about yeah, communication and speaking louder or interrupting people,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
not
There's
great.
there's so much stuff around that, right? Kind of the old image of a leader was the image of this domineering white male, let's say. I'm sure in the let's say South Asia, where I'm from, or in Africa, I'm sure there are similar stereotypes as well, but they don't get written much about. So I'm just going to continue with domineering white male. Apologies to white people, it's not about them. But definitely, the stereotype is you interrupt people, you speak louder, you kind of your body language is that of this alpha male, um, and that definitely totally sounds wrong to me, even as a man. And I can imagine that you would just feel it's asking you to be somebody who you're not at all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the way you phrased it now, it's exactly how it sounded to me. Also, take up a lot of space. I remember there was an example of when you sit at the table, just try to use as much space as possible. And I was thinking, but
Wow.
but there are other people sitting here. Why would I why would I do that? If the table's my own, sure, I'm going to spread everything. I don't mind. But if there are other, so it's yeah. But I think you're right. It's something that this is what was expected at some
Yeah,
point in the past. This was this expectation, and I think it became a stereotype. But this is what people expected leaders to
yeah.
be.
It's crazy. I think all of us go through this imposter syndrome, right? Every time we step up, there's that feeling, and then we try to learn as much as we can, and oftentimes we get the worst advice you could hope to get. But do you think um, women struggle more with these kind of things than men in tech, for example?
With these kind of things, you mean with the advice or with the imposter syndrome? Or
Yeah, with imposter syndrome and also taking up space as a leader, because we do have I think at least in my experience, tech definitely has a high representation of women compared to some of the other industries, still way below than what it could be. Um, and there are more and more women stepping up into leadership roles now. Do you feel that they struggle with owning that role as they are, um, and with all the bad advice and so on?
I think there are many factors that contribute to that. So as a personal opinion, I think yes, mostly because I've struggled with that, and I know other women who have struggled with that, but I don't want to generalize that. I remember talking to someone, I think it was, I don't remember how many years ago that was, but we had a women's group in the company. I think each company has something similar, and we were meeting once in a while, really to talk about these topics, about imposter syndrome or just being a woman in tech. This was many years ago, and I remember there was one woman. She had a very different upbringing than I did, and she wasn't familiar with this concept about imposter syndrome or feeling like you don't belong in tech,
Yeah.
just because her upbringing and the environment that she was in, it was very nurturing, and she always was supported, and she felt like she belonged in every step of the way. And she was very surprised to learn that it's not the same for others. And for me, it was the other way around. I was surprised to learn that it can be also that other women can have a different experience. So I think there are many factors that contribute to this, and generalizing it is not really the best way to do it. But I do feel like it is a bigger problem for
Mm-hmm.
women.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we get to solve it with good advice for everybody and and anybody who needs more support, that there's support available. Um, I want to go back to you as a person. It sounds like you're somebody who is figuring a lot of things out for herself. In terms of you're proactively looking at what the role might need. You're thinking about what the team might need. Um, you're interested in boxing, so I'm assuming you're taking care of your physical energy levels as well. Um, is that it, all of that points to me to growth mindset? Um, is that something that you also bring consciously to your workplace and to people, or try to encourage, or how did you get to this point, and how do you continue to share it with others?
I do try to bring that to work as much as possible, right? Or to share it with others as much as possible. And I think it comes back to my, leading by example. I just share with people like, hey, look, this is what I do, this is how I learn, just to maybe start a discussion or maybe spark some ideas in people's mind. And generally, I try to to make it, let's say, clear to everybody in the team that, or not necessarily to make it clear, but to give people the space to learn, to
Yeah,
grow. And one thing that I introduced in one of the teams was something that we call inspiration days. So once in 2 weeks on Fridays, we have an inspiration day where the engineers spend time to learn something, either I don't know, do a prototype for something that they wanted to for some time, learn a new programming language, whatever. So I generally try to understand maybe what's preventing people from maybe learning or growing or having this growth mindset, and see how I can fix that, or how I can give them the space to do this. Mm, and for me, it's I like learning. I I read a lot, and in general, it's this is why I also like my job, because I can learn a lot. There's always so much to learn,
yeah,
and I try to also share that maybe in knowledge sharing sessions within the company, right? I think when I learn something, I'm sharing that with people, and I also encourage others to do that. Like I had somebody in the team who had an idea for a project, and he did that in one of these inspiration days, and it was really cool. So I encourage him to go to one of our tech talks and share that with everybody else, because maybe then other people get an idea and they will try it out.
yeah.
So just, sharing is caring.
Incredible. Um, these inspiration days, t tell us a bit more about that. Is it just a hackathon or more than a hackathon? Is it a full day, half day? How did you even convince the company to give you an entire day or even half?
So it's slightly different from one team to the other. One team has one day once in 2 weeks. Another team has half a day every week. So in the end, we just left it up to the teams to find something that they're comfortable with,
Yeah,
because one solution fits all. Well, there rarely is such a case. Um, so. and it's not. It can be a bit like a hackathon. So we had in one of the inspiration days, there were multiple people coming together. They were trying, what they were trying to do, I think something to generate some documentation. I don't remember the details, but we had like 4 people coming together and trying to build a prototype for that, which was really cool. In a lot of cases, it's just one person sitting down, maybe doing a course and trying some things out. It's really up to the people. Um, and how we convinced the company to do that, it's well by looking at the Pulse survey results. So I think a lot of companies in tech do these regular surveys to check the pulse of the
Mm-hmm.
company, and one of the lowest scores for that survey was around innovation. And
Right.
we had a mini retrospective with the teams, and we asked them, okay, what can we do? And
Yeah.
we started a discussion. Then we had some ideas, bounced around some ideas, and in the end we decided to try this out, see if it improves, and just keep checking in to see if we have to keep an eye on that particular score, but also to check in with the people to see what their experience is, because maybe sometimes numbers are just numbers. There's more to a number than just maybe one particular detail.
Yeah. So that's amazing. I want to focus more on the hackathon part because I find that that is definitely something where people you kind of hit a lot of targets, right? People coming together, the team gets to know each other, people trying something new that probably has potential for the company, um, and just the pure joy of learning without any pressure is amazing. But often I see companies struggling with the idea of letting people choose their own projects or connecting it with business goals. Um, and I still kind of, it scrambles my mind because kind of telling somebody to get creative now on a specific day just is an oxymoron to me. But I understand business side where for them, otherwise it becomes a day off, and they're trying to get some value out of it. So what balance have you guys found? Is it completely free for engineers to choose what they want to work on, or is there some connection to the business as well?
Mm, it's so hmm, it's not really, nobody's going to the engineers and telling them, hey, it has to be connected to business outcomes. But I think there is let's say maybe unspoken agreement, or at least from
Hmm.
from what I've noticed, the kind of projects that people work on the kind of prototypes they do benefit either their day-to-day lives as engineers in the company, or the business in one way or another.
Right.
Um, and it might be that this is just like I said, something that everybody takes it as a given, that it has to be like this, or maybe they want to improve their lives as engineers.
Mm.
Though I did have that in the past where, like you said, the company was very specific about these projects being tied to some sort of business outcome, and we did have quite a lot of discussions back and forth. As like you said, it's not really, yeah, you kind of tell people to be creative in a certain box. It's
Mm.
doesn't really work that well.
Indeed. Um, so where else does creativity come into the picture? We've talked about hackathons, we've talked about learning, we've talked about being helpful. Um, where do you introduce joy? That's a question. I have a sticky note over there that has a lot of the other words, and the joy column is the emptiest one because I'm still trying to figure out how do I bring that concept into work. Um, and it feels too alien still. How is it for you?
Joy, that's a good one. When you say joy, the first thing that comes to mind is celebration, celebrating our successes. even the smallest ones. And that's something that, just from my experience, we don't do enough of.
Yeah,
And I think, I'm sure there are other ways also to bring more joy into the day-to-day work. But I think, celebrating the small successes is maybe one of the more straightforward ones. And it doesn't have to be a big celebration like, I don't know, you have a big dinner with everybody in the company, or something like that. It can be something smaller, right? It really depends on the person or on the team. It can be a small bonus for someone, or just recognition in an all hands a gift voucher for something. It really depends on what would um, work for each person. I think that would be a good place to start celebrating these. And of course, you feel like you achieved something and you got recognized for it, so you have more energy and you want to do more of that, because it feels nice to be recognized
yeah,
for your work.
makes sense. I'm gonna start looking for that. I think one of the things that I find often engineers end up missing is the connection with business achievements. Because I mean, in quite a few companies, you'd still get some feedback from the user's point of view. If you have some analytics, if you have some way of getting qualitative feedback, you do get it. But there's often this disconnect with the business achievements that you're contributing towards. Is that something you notice as well, and how do you deal with that?
Yes, that is a very common observation. I think I've seen that in all my previous companies. I think in each organization or in each company there were different approaches on how to put this together. I think that this is where we come in, the leaders, and we are the ones that can help connect the dots. Because you can have, of course, all hands where you have maybe the CEO that gives an overview of business outcomes and how the work that the teams are doing fit into that. But that's something maybe that's being done once per quarter, and then you kind of lose track of that. I think maybe finding a good tool where it's easy to visualize the connection, and
Yeah,
repetition is also a good thing in these cases. What I was doing in one of my previous teams, we had I think a bi-weekly all hands, and we always made sure to have a slide or two on our OKRs. We were using OKRs back then, and how they fit into the company one and the progress. So whenever we talked about the progress, we also showed how it fits into the business outcomes. Um,
right.
but I don't think there's no silver bullet there. It's, I think, just finding something that works for the organization and just roll with it and adjust it later.
Yeah. So, for you personally, are you the kind of person who wants to know what you're building towards and how you're contributing, or would you rather just tell me what needs to be done and I'll get it over with?
Now, I need to know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I need to understand. I've always been this way. I need to understand how things work and why they work like this, but also with my own work. Yeah, I need to understand why. Um,
Yeah,
because then it also makes it easier for me to do my job, because then I can take, maybe if I understand why I'm doing something, I would take different decisions maybe. Right?
yeah.
That might be better in the long run.
Do you feel that more and more people think that way now or demand this?
Yep. Yes, I've noticed that over the years, more and more people want to understand. I think it's the software engineering work has changed a lot. If you think about it from the beginning until now, and there's more and more of a curiosity, but also the need to understand why we're building something. Again, up to a certain extent, to make sure that we take the right decisions, but also because it fits into your sense of purpose.
Yeah,
You come to work, you know why you're doing that. and it helps you feel more fulfilled as a person.
Indeed. Purpose has definitely taken center stage in business these days. Um, how do you how do you find the balance between your personal purpose and the business purpose? Because oftentimes the business purpose is a bit vague. Personal purpose easier to figure out, and then there's values and can get quite mixed up.
It can, and one one way to do that is whenever you choose a new job, you join a new company, you try to make sure up to a certain extent that they're aligned, like your purpose, the company's person, your values, the company's values, which is kind of difficult sometimes to do during interviews because it's just a certain amount of time. I think in general, you know, if you as a person, you know what your purpose is, you know what your values are, you will know what to look for
Right.
in a company, and also it depends on how much you're willing to adjust or to compromise. And if there is a really big mismatch, then maybe it's time to leave. It's as easy as that. So I think as long as you have enough self-awareness to know your values, your purpose, what your purpose is, or what you want it to be, then you can try to find a good match for you. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah. How do you find the company's purpose? How could you figure that out?
Oh, yeah, it can be tricky. Um, at least the way I'm thinking about it is looking at what the company does in general. So what kind of products they're building, right? In general, also when you let's say interview with people, you can also ask them, what's your vision, right? What are you working towards? And you try to fill in some of the gaps to figure out.
Mm,
Uh, but I think it also in a lot of cases you get only a very high level understanding, and you find out
mm,
once you actually start working in the company and you're there for maybe 6 months or so. So I think it's also a lot about gut feeling, by reading about the company, talking to the people. You get a certain gut feeling sometimes, and sometimes it's wrong, sometimes
yeah.
it works out.
Indeed, indeed. Um, it's definitely not easy because in a way we are asking for a high degree of self-awareness and then a high degree of self-awareness from a group of people, and for that one representative in the interview to be able to relay that information, it's a tough ask. And this brings me to the question of how do you kind of maintain and increase self-awareness within a group, within a team, as an engineering lead or as a lead? Is there something you do? Because you mentioned the biweekly all hands meetings where you want to bring in some more business context as well. Is that an attempt at creating some degree of self-awareness of the team, of what they're doing, how that contributes, etc.?
Yes. So one of the purposes of this biweekly is that it's also what we've been doing. So I've been doing this also in multiple teams. So we do connect what the team is doing with the business, but also each team brings their own content, something that they're proud of, that they want to
Okay.
share with the rest
Mm,
of the organization. And I think that's really, it really also helps with the self-awareness, because then the team takes a step back and they think, okay, what did we work on in the past? Like, is this something cool? Is this something we want to share?
mm,
And it's part of that. But in the end, it's also up to each individual to work on that. And one, let's say, approach we can take as leaders is to work with people in one-on-ones, and maybe suggest some activities or courses or something. And it really depends on the person in the end.
mm. Awesome. Let's switch topics now. Why did you choose boxing and what are you learning from boxing?
Ooh, why I chose boxing? Well, I chose boxing because I was looking for an activity that would get rid of negative energy,
Uh-huh.
and I Googled sports that help me get rid of negative energy. And one of the first results was boxing. Like, hey, let's try that out.
Makes sense.
Um, yeah, that was many years ago, and I really liked it. And one one thing that I really learned that I learned from boxing, and I think it's really helping me out in multiple areas of my life, is staying calm and being present, being in the moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because it's, for example, at sparring, right? You have your sparring partner there, and there's so many things that you need to pay attention to, right? Of course, they're attacking you, you have to block, you have to attack. There's a lot of other people in the room, right? And you can't also
Mm.
have your mind at, oh, what did I do today at work? I wonder if I sent that email or whatever. You can't, because otherwise you're going to get
Yeah.
punched. You have to be in the moment and focus on just you and your sparring partner. And that's it.
Yeah.
Everything else goes away. And keep calm and think through what you're doing. If you panic, that also doesn't help you. And I try to apply that also outside
Yeah.
of sparring. Not so easy in a lot of cases, but I try.
Oh, but it's almost a superpower is to stay calm while you're being attacked.
Well, yes, it takes practice. It takes practice. The first time I did not want to do that. I did not want to do sparring. I'm like, I don't want to get punched. Who would want that?
Indeed. It's amazing. I did Taekwondo for many years and then stopped. And while I was at here, I joined Shimosa and I was trying out different classes. And I went to the sparring class in my first week. And guess what? I got punched in the face, and I had a black eye for a whole week after that. It didn't hurt or anything. It wasn't too bad. I wasn't completely out of shape either. I didn't just take the beating, but I got hit, and it was exactly this lesson of you need to stay in the moment and you need to pay attention to what's happening. And the difference between getting hit and not getting hit is literally milliseconds and millimeters of where your hand is and how strong you hold it or how loose you are. And it completely changes your mindset and definitely starts to spill into to work as well.
It does for sure. And I also go to Chimosa, by the way. That's I really like it there.
Ah, cool, awesome. Yeah, they have some amazing classes. I think I was learning from Steffi, who's not there anymore, I believe.
Mhm.
She went independent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and then I got busy and I haven't been back. Um, what else? I'm thinking I wanted to tie this to self-leadership. Because we talked a lot about leadership, and in a way, for sure, what I'm hearing is that you're doing a lot of things for yourself as well. In a way, you're challenging yourself, you're getting yourself into situations where you will grow and you will get to express yourself with all your skills. Is there anything particular that comes to your mind when we talk about self-leadership, or do you think it's just another word for growth mindset?
I I can't think of anything specific. Or at least in my head, I never thought about it like this. Like self-leadership, for me, it's really about, yeah, the growth mindset, just, try to get yourself out of your comfort zone, to learn, to grow. Of course, there are setbacks. Sometimes you don't feel like it. Sometimes you want to lay on the couch for a week. That's fine. This is where you're
Hmm.
at the moment. Next week is going to be better. It's really a lot about self-awareness, growth, getting to know yourself, and bringing that, coming back to what I said at the beginning, bringing that also to work, of
Hmm.
having the same approach in all areas of your life.
Indeed. So we are approaching our 1 hour mark. Do you want to summarize for us some of the lessons you've learned along the way, and some of the things you already mentioned during this episode as well? The stage is yours.
Okay, summarizing. So I can start with keep calm, keep calm, help others, and learn. I think that would be a very short summary, but I think that kind of highlights the main point.
So keep calm, help others, and keep learning.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Perfect message to end today's episode. Thank you so much for being with us, Florentina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ciao, everybody.
Bye.